Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. We're watching NBC News Now. Today is the first full day of witness testimony in Derek Chauvin's murder trial, and we are hearing firsthand accounts of what happened the day George Floyd died.
You can see his eyes slowly, rolling back in his head, and him having his mouth open, wide open, slowly with drool and slob and dryness on his mouth. And you can see that he's trying to, gasp for air, and trying to be able to breathe as he's down there, and trying to move his face, side to side so he can, I'm assuming gasp for more air.
In Georgia, growing pressure on businesses to fight the state's new restrictive voting law, activists threatening to boycott some of Georgia's biggest companies. And in D.C., President Biden out with a diverse slate of federal court nominees. The 11 picks include 3 black women, the first Asian American woman for the district court in Washington, D.C., and the first Muslim American federal judge in U.S. history.
Overall, this group represents a paradigm shift in the type of people who can see themselves on the federal bench while still maintaining the president's absolute highest standards for the qualifications, integrity, and fairness of each individual being considered.
Let's bring in NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece. Shannon, a White House official says the administration is 100% focused on confirming the new judicial picks, not looking ahead to SCOTUS. What else can you tell us about them?
Well, and with a 50-50 Senate, essentially, and the vice president has a tie-breaking vote, they really do need to be focused on confirming these judicial picks. They don't have any wiggle room. Yeah. They're going to have to keep Democrats in line to get them through. They can get nominees through on 50 votes, unlike other pieces of legislation where you have to get over that filibuster. But you mentioned the Supreme Court there, and one of these nominees, Judge Brown Jackson, to the D.C. Circuit, has been speculated as a potential nominee for the Supreme Court, particularly because as a candidate, Biden said he would like to put an African-American woman on the Supreme Court. Now, we are kind of nearing a few months away from the end of the Supreme Court term when you typically hear of retirements. But of course, no reporting to indicate there will be any retirements yet. But of course, right. The SCOTUS stakes are never too early to begin.
No, never too early. Always rumblings there. Shannon, White House officials, not the president, briefing Senate Democrats on the Build Back Better plan today ahead of President Biden's trip to Pittsburgh tomorrow. Could you tell us a little bit more about that briefing and also what we should be watching out for from the president himself tomorrow?
Well, the White House today and for weeks now has been working behind the scenes to start to build support, not just bipartisan support, but just the support among Democrats for this infrastructure plan, which we expect to be very broad. And it is something that Biden campaigned on, doing a big, broad infrastructure package that goes beyond your traditional roads and bridges. We expect to hear him include things that would improve U.S. manufacturing competitiveness against China, clean energy measures, things to help out childcare providers and families, so incentives and tax credits there. He's going to lay out all the details. And, one White House official told me that, as much time and effort as they put into thinking about this plan, they do see it as a jumping off point to negotiations. And they expect a lot of back and forth between Congress between now and Memorial Day, much more back and forth than we saw in that COVID relief stimulus package that they got through relatively easily with just Democratic support.
Shannon, President Biden signed the PPP Extension Act at the White House today. It extends PPP loans until May 31st. What did the president have to say about that today?
Well, and a reminder, this is that program that gives forgivable loans, so essentially grants to small businesses so they can keep their employees on the payroll while they get through this tough time. Here's what the president had to say today when he signed that.
It is a bipartisan accomplishment. Nearly 90,000 businesses are still in line, and there's money left. Without somebody signing this bill today, there are hundreds of thousands of people who could lose their jobs and small family businesses that might close forever.
So by extending this from the end of March to the end of May, that's going to give small businesses extra time to get those applications in. And it's also going to give lenders and banks extra time to process those applications. They've been saying that they've gotten thousands, and they just haven't been able to get through the paperwork. So that's the intent of this law he signed today.
All right, Shannon, we also have to ask you a question about the first dogs. We're hearing about a second nipping incident involving the Biden's German Shepherd Major. What happened? What do you know?
Right. So my colleague Kelly O'Donnell was told that while Major was out on a walk, he had another nipping incident that required the individual to get some treatment from the White House medical unit. They attributed it to the dog still trying to get used to his new surroundings. But of course, this is the second, quote unquote, nipping incident of Major. He had done some obedience training at Wilmington, where he spent some time, Wilmington, where the president has a home. You know, he might have to go back for another course of that training, though. Apparently, this is still a struggle for him and his new home here.
Hey, it sounds like someone's trying to send the message that he just might like it better in Delaware. I don't know, but we're hoping everyone there is doing okay and that Major isn't having too tough of an adjustment. Shannon, thank you.
Thank you.
Several civil rights groups teaming up to sue the state of Georgia. The ACLU, NAACP, and Southern Poverty Law Center all calling Georgia's new election law voter suppression, while corporate America isn't saying all that much about the new restrictions. Now activists are pressuring companies in Georgia to step up and speak out. NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander is in Atlanta, where many of those businesses are based.
Well, Allison, this piece of legislation here in Georgia is not even a week old, but already it's facing a number of legal challenges. Just today, the ACLU has announced that it's filing another lawsuit on behalf of several groups here in Georgia. This now makes the third federal challenge to this law that's now on the books here in Georgia. But some people are actually putting their pressure in a different place. Georgia businesses hoping that they will take action.
From the courts to the Capitol, backlash to Georgia's new election law is growing. Now, opponents are setting their sights on Georgia's business community, hoping pressure on their pockets will push them to speak out against the sweeping law, which includes a new ID requirement for mail-in ballots. Republicans say that it will help secure elections, but critics call it blatant voter suppression. Across the internet, hashtags Boycott Delta and Boycott Coca-Cola are picking up steam, taking aim at the two Georgia-based giants. This morning, Coca-Cola's president says he is disappointed the law passed, adding, "Voting in our country is a sacred right and duty, and we recognize we have a responsibility to protect and promote it." A similar sentiment from Delta Airlines, calling voting access a fundamental right for all citizens. But upsetting some activists after parts of the statement appeared to praise the law, arguing it improved considerably during the legislative process.
It's not just a Georgia issue, it's a national issue, and they can't sit on the sidelines.
With Georgia's law already on the books, those opposed to it are calling on companies to support federal voting rights legislation and also urging them to speak out against other states weighing laws similar to the one in Georgia. Meanwhile, a Georgia state lawmaker is back on the job after being arrested for knocking on the governor's office door as he signed the bill into law. Escorted by her attorney and Martin Luther King III, State Representative Park Cannon returned to the state capitol on Monday. Her lawyer says she will plead not guilty to the charges against her.
Do you believe that she should have been allowed inside the room?
I absolutely believe she should have been allowed inside the room. And many bills in Georgia are signed in public so the citizens and the elected officials can witness it.
Now, Allison, what's interesting is while we're seeing these calls for boycotts kind of circle around the internet, there are some people who are against the law, but they're also against the concept of boycotting businesses. For example, Reverend Bernice King, of course, the CEO of the King Center, daughter of the civil rights leader, said that hurting businesses, or boycotting businesses rather, only hurts middle-class Georgians and people who are already grappling with poverty. Allison?
New Jersey voters can now head to the polls 10 days before an election. Governor Phil Murphy signing legislation today that expands access to the ballot box. Here he is this afternoon.
New Jersey reminds the nation that our democracy is made stronger when we make it easier for the people's voices to be heard. That our democracy wins when we open the doors of our polling places wide instead of slamming them shut.
NBCNews.com senior reporter Jane Tim joining me now from Trenton, New Jersey. So, Jane, what do we need to know about this new voting legislation?
So New Jersey voters will be able to head to the polls a full 10 days early and cast a ballot just as they would on Election Day on those same machines. Voters advocates say that this is really important to give voters options. They have weekend options now, and they have evening options. And advocates say when you're talking about voting restrictions and voting expansion, those hours are the ones that are critical to getting access to the ones who need it and don't have the flexibility, like shift workers. Democrats are using this as a victory lap. You saw Murphy there with Stacey Abrams talking about how this is what people should be doing. Expansions like this tend to be pretty popular with voters. Voters want options, they want convenience, and this does well for them. They want to have this contrast with states like Georgia, who have these closed-door bill signings and people getting arrested at them. I mean, this is a narrative that they're stoking and encouraging.
Yeah, Jane, let's talk more about that contrast. In New Jersey, Democrats control both chambers of the legislature, but you've been doing a whole lot of reporting on Republican-led states proposing voter restrictions. Any new developments there?
You know, I'm following hundreds of bills across the country that are slowly moving through counties or for committees, excuse me. And there's a lot of them. These are bills that limit early voting, limit mail voting, typically the proposals that we saw expanded last year, and particularly the proposals that Donald Trump didn't like last year, that he claimed were riddled with fraud, despite the fact that there is no evidence of those things being riddled with fraud. You're seeing a lot of efforts to what Republicans say is to encourage trust in the process, even though it is the party that cast doubt on the process in the first place.
All right, Jane Tim in Trenton, New Jersey. Thank you. Jurors hearing eyewitness testimony in day 2 of Derek Chauvin's murder trial. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster is outside the courthouse in Minneapolis. Shaq, today we heard from a young woman who witnessed George Floyd's murder. She was underage at the time, so the judge ordered the cameras not to show her face. But here's some of her emotional testimony.
When I look at George Floyd, I look at my dad, I look at my brothers, I look at my cousins, my uncles, because they are all black. I have a black father, I have a black brother, I have black friends. And I look at that and I look at how that could have been one of them. It's been nights. I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more.
Shaq, what else did she have to say? And how is the jury reacting to this witness testimony that they heard today? Some of it very emotional.
Yeah, that was definitely a moment that, based on the poll reporters, based on the 2 reporters who are inside of the courtroom, that they say the jury truly responded to, that they looked up, they stopped writing for a little bit, and just really dug in and had looks of sympathy. That was something that the reporter said was apparent even through the masks that all of the jurors have. One other thing that we heard from her was that she was there with her 9-year-old cousin to go and get snacks. And one thing that you're hearing from all these witnesses that we've heard from today is that they're all bystanders and that they were all going about their daily lives. We heard from Donald Williams, who was one of the more vocal people in that video, who was there to get a soda. We heard from another witness who was there to get an auxiliary cord. The person who's testifying right now as we speak was a firefighter who was off duty at the time, who was just going on a walk after she had a day off, after she did a 48-hour shift. So you're getting the sense that a lot of the people who were there just happened to be there, and what they saw, they believed was so outrageous, and that is what kept them there. And that is what they're telling the jurors one after the other today. Allison.
How about the Floyd family, Shaq? They have been at the courthouse today, most of them watching from an overflow room. What are they saying about the proceedings? I imagine it has to be so difficult for them to sit through this.
Yeah, we haven't heard much from them today. I saw in one of the poll reports that the family member, the one seat reserved for the George Floyd family inside of the courtroom, the family member looked down at his hands as they were playing the video today. They played a different angle of George Floyd under the knee of Derek Chauvin. They played that in court today, and he looked down at his hands and kind of muttered mumbled or muttered something as that was happening. But We know the family, most of the family is in the overflow room of the courthouse. Something that we heard from George Floyd's nephew yesterday is that when they were playing that video, that full video that went on Facebook that really sparked the passion around this movement, he had to walk out because he was bracing himself for it. He said he was trying to get mentally prepared essentially for it, but he just couldn't take it. It was too emotional for him, especially when he said he heard George Floyd crying out, asking for help, calling for his mother. So this is definitely going to be an emotional trial. That video will come up even more. There's lots of other video already in evidence, I can tell you, Allison. So there's a lot more to come, and this will only get tougher, I believe, for the family.
Jack, how are things there in the city? I know this is a tense and emotional time for folks in Minneapolis as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw me looking over right before you came to me, but I hear an echo of some protesters down the street. There's been a consistent group of protesters here, a relatively small group, about a dozen or so, that have been at one of the entrances to the courthouse waving flags, showing their visibility. Cars would go by and honk. They would honk the horn every once in a while. Yesterday, we did see an organized protest with a couple of hundred people. That, of course, was the first day of opening statements. I think the biggest protest that we saw of this trial period was the day before the trial started. That's when you had about 1,000 people there. But all protests have been peaceful. That's important to note, Allison.
Yeah, Shaq, I can hear it faintly in my ear, the sound of those protesters in the background. No doubt that's what you were checking out. Thank you so much for all of your reporting from Minneapolis. Appreciate it. Jeffrey Epstein's longtime confidant, Ghislaine Maxwell, facing 2 new charges, including, for the first time, sex trafficking. The new indictment also adds a 4th alleged victim, saying Maxwell groomed and paid a 14-year-old girl to engage in sex acts with Epstein from 2001 to 2004. This is on top of 6 charges Maxwell was already facing tied to Epstein's alleged sex trafficking network. NBC News correspondent for investigations, Tom Winter, joins me now. Tom, in your reporting, you described this new indictment as a significant escalation. Tell us more.
So, Allison, I think when you look at the charges that have been added here, those sex trafficking charges, as you mentioned, you think about those and you think about the potential penalties if she's convicted. Now, she's pleaded not guilty to all the charges in the past. Some of them are on screen right now. But when you look at the sex trafficking charge in particular, in the conspiracy to sex traffic, you look at those charges and you look at the maximum penalties, and it could be effectively a life sentence for her if she's convicted and given the maximum here. So that, I think, is a significant escalation. Also, the detail and also the timing of this. So before, the conduct that had been charged went up to 1997. This pulls it forward to 2004, the alleged incident and the new victim in this these 2 particular counts, I should say. That stretches from 2001 to 2004. So this brings it up really to the eve of when the initial investigation started back in 2005. So I think from that standpoint, these are significant developments.
Tom, what else did you learn about Maxwell's alleged behavior from this indictment?
Well, the allegations are very disturbing. This involved allegedly a 14-year-old girl that apparently on numerous occasions she was paid, quote, hundreds of dollars, according to the superseding indictment, to engage in sex acts with Jeffrey Epstein. That originally was supposed to be massages for him, and then it turned into to sex acts and sex abuse on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, we've seen that in nearly every other victim before, that she was involved allegedly in grooming this young person, that she appeared nude several times in front of this person, made inappropriate comments, also tried to get her to travel with Jeffrey Epstein, even offering the ability to get her a passport, which apparently this alleged victim denied or declined. And also they paid her to recruit other young girls for these massages that would then, of course, later turned sexual. So a series of disturbing allegations, including the gifts of lingerie that were apparently sent from New York. That's why one of the reasons why prosecutors in New York could investigate mostly Florida crimes, because there was that interstate commerce that involved New York. But either way, Allison, just difficult things to read in an indictment.
Yeah, really disturbing for sure. Tom, so Maxwell, as we know, is set to go on trial in July. What do these new charges mean for that case? Did they change the timeline here at all?
So far, no changes to the court document, to the court docket, I should say, Allison.
Okay.
So we don't anticipate any changes, although, the big thing looming over this case and every single other big federal case at the moment is COVID-19. Now, obviously, things are getting better as the vaccines get rolled out, but we'll just have to see whether or not the pandemic continues to delay this case beyond the things that might normally push back a trial schedule, Allison.
All right, Tom, thanks so much for the update.
Sure thing.
The Biden administration wants offshore wind farms to power 20 million homes by the end of the decade. So will your house be one of them? NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman shows us where you might see more wind turbines over the next couple of years.
Sail a few miles off the coast of Europe and you'll see them. Wind turbines rising out of the water, hundreds of feet in the air. More than 5,000 in all. Here in the U.S., we have less than 10. That's because while onshore wind is big business up and down the Midwest, offshore wind has never really taken off. The Biden administration says it's time for that to change.
I have seen this opportunity coming and coming and coming and coming for a lot longer than I thought. But now we're finally here. We're ready to rock and roll.
As President Biden promises fighting climate change will bring millions of green jobs, the White House says it's leaving no stone unturned to jumpstart offshore wind. They're setting an ambitious goal, 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. Enough to power more than 20 million homes at least part of the time. 30 gigawatts is like building 15 new Hoover dams. But it's still a drop in the bucket compared to onshore wind. Already, the U.S. has about 120 gigawatts of power from onshore wind turbines. Ramping up won't be easy or cheap. So the Energy Department says it's offering $3 billion in loan guarantees, while the Interior Department is creating a new wind area between Long Island and the New Jersey coast. High costs to build floating wind farms in deep waters are one obstacle. But for years, wind developers have also complained their projects were tied up in federal red tape.
I recognize that over the past few years, the federal government's approach to offshore wind has probably seemed like a chicken with its head cut off, no direction, no consistency, but it is a new day under the Biden administration.
Now the administration says it's moving ahead with a key environmental review for a long-planned wind project off the shore of New Jersey that could power 500,000 homes. Offshore wind has its opponents, including those who say it's unreliable because the wind doesn't blow 24 hours a day. That hurdle can be overcome. But some who live along the shore also worry the towering turbines will disturb their view or raise their electricity costs. The New Jersey project has long faced opposition from local city councils.
When somebody says, well, not in our backyard, well, I say not in anybody's backyard if you don't know what it costs.
But as the U.S. tries to shift away from fossil fuels, it needs more clean electricity to power everything from homes and stoves to cars and trucks. That's why the Biden administration says there's huge untapped potential that starts at the water's edge.
Arkansas passing a bill blocking gender-affirming care for trans youth. It would ban access to things like reversible puberty blockers and hormones. The deputy director for transgender justice at the ACLU calling it, quote, the single most extreme anti-trans law to ever pass through a state legislature. Joining me now, Joe Yerkeba, associate editor of NBC News Out. Joe, unless Governor Hutchinson vetoes this bill, Arkansas will be the first state to ban gender-affirming care for transgender minors. Tell us more about this bill and what it could mean for trans kids in the state.
Sure. So the bill would ban all gender-affirming care. As you mentioned, that includes puberty blockers, which temporarily pause and delay puberty to prevent the negative mental health effects that a lot of trans young people experience. And they're entirely reversible. It also includes hormones, which many young trans folks use once they begin puberty. And it will negatively impact their mental health, according to physicians that I've spoken with. One pediatrician already testified in front of the Arkansas Senate last week that she has already seen an increase in attempted suicides among young trans people that she has worked with.
Major medical associations support gender-affirming care. The president of the American Academy of Pediatrics actually coming out with a statement opposing the Arkansas bill. What else are medical professionals saying here besides some of the concerns that you just mentioned?
Medical professionals are saying that the bill also paints an inaccurate picture of what gender-affirming care actually looks like for minors. So there's a lot of focus in this bill on surgery, and minors aren't receiving surgery. They're often just receiving things like puberty blockers. They also are not receiving care without the consent of their parents or other medical professionals. They often usually have a team of providers, including mental health professionals, that are deciding what kind of care is best for them.
Arkansas is not alone here. What other states should we be watching? Where else are they considering similar measures?
Another measure is being considered right now in Alabama, and it's actually considered a more extreme bill than the one in Arkansas because it includes felony penalties for medical providers who provide gender-affirming care to trans youth. And it would also extend to people 19 or under 19 years of age. It would also ban coverage of gender-affirming care using public funds, so under Medicaid. And there's a similar bill being considered in Tennessee that would also include misdemeanor penalties against medical providers who would provide gender-affirming care.
All right, Joe, always appreciate having you on. Thanks for coming on with us today. 3 more women accusing Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson of sexual misconduct, alleging in separate lawsuits that he assaulted and harassed them during massage sessions last year. There are now 19 women in total accusing Watson of misconduct. Yahoo Sports NFL columnist Charles Robinson joining me now. Charles, you're reporting that one of these new lawsuits claims Watson, quote, deleted Instagram messages, contacted people who formerly provided him massages in an attempt to settle. Tell us about these new allegations.
Yeah, that was in one of the most recent 3 suits that was filed. And interestingly enough, Deshaun Watson's attorney, Rusty Hardin, actually in a statement admitted that Deshaun Watson had indeed deleted Instagram messages. However, he said that stopped a day before the first lawsuit was filed on March 15th. And he also went on to say, once again, that they categorically deny the accusations that are made in the 19 civil suits that have been filed. He explained away the deletion of these messages is something that people do regularly. I don't know if that's factual or not, but this is something that continues to press on for both sides. I think you're going to see these lawyers take pokes at each other through statements in these suits on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah. How has Watson responded to all this? What else are we hearing from him about these allegations?
Well, Watson's initial denial was that he's never disrespected any woman. And, this is something that came out right on the precipice of the first lawsuit being filed. He has not commented since. His agent at one point had sent out a few days after Watson's first denial a tweet that was vague, but essentially said, look, sometimes people that are accused of things can be victims themselves, and the people that are making the accusations are the perpetrators. That's quieted down significantly since Watson's attorney, Rusty Hardin, has started to make statements. So I think essentially he's saying, look, we're going to have one unified message here. It's going to come from your attorney. That's what you pay me for.
So, look, obviously the Houston Texans and the NFL are aware of what's going on. Are they saying anything about these accusations just yet?
Well, the Houston Texans general manager, Nick Caserio, actually came out recently on a team subscribed podcast and said, look, we are obviously aware of these suits. We're taking the matters very seriously. That's really the only thing that the Texans have said. I think they're leaning heavily on following the league's guidance on this. And the NFL has opened up its own investigation. It has an investigative arm specifically geared towards sexual assault, domestic violence. A very well-known New York attorney, Lisa Friel, was hired as a vice president to oversee these investigations. She has sent letters to the attorneys that are involved, essentially seeking out victim statements or an ability to interview the victims. And the league will then move forward and decide what exactly it can and wants to do with Deshaun Watson, whether that's a suspension or placing him on something called the commissioner's exempt list, which is essentially just sitting him down in limbo while these things are sorted out.
All right. There are some disturbing allegations. Charles, thanks so much for the update.
Thanks for having me.
More than 53 million Americans are fully vaccinated against COVID-19, and millions more are hoping to get the shot soon. But polling shows COVID vaccine demand is noticeably lower among conservative Americans. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has the story.
Yeah. For most Americans, a moment of relief. But for some Republicans, the idea of getting vaccinated is a non-starter.
Why do we need a vaccination?
The numbers are consistent and supported by a series of studies. A recent PBS NewsHour Marist poll found 41% of Republicans don't plan on getting the COVID vaccine. That's compared to only 11% of Democrats who expressed opposition. Research from Kaiser and Civics revealed similar findings, and a University of Texas poll found 61% of white Republicans in the Lone Star State will not get the vaccine.
I'm not an anti-vaxxer. It has helped. Vaccines have helped eradicate a lot of diseases.
But when it comes to COVID, it's a different story.
I think that they're using the public as guinea pigs.
In our conversations with Republicans refusing the vaccine, several threads emerged. One relates to the seriousness of the pandemic.
It's not a crisis. It was widespread, but no, everybody is not dying from it.
The CDC has confirmed around 550,000 U.S. deaths from coronavirus. Others pointed to inadequate proof of safety for a vaccine that's been around for less than a year.
I don't want it because I'm asthmatic for one, and I do have a lot of allergies. I'm scared of anaphylactic shock, which is a side effect. The vaccines that are out there are not proven.
During testing, the CDC found around 11 cases of anaphylaxis per million doses of the Pfizer vaccine, making it extremely rare. All of the COVID vaccines have been tested on tens of thousands of people. Millions have received shots, most with little more than mild side effects.
I didn't even feel that.
So why are some Republicans, many of whom identify as conservative, wary of a vaccine?
Typically, conservatives are less trusting of vaccines in general, in part because they tend to have less trust in science.
Timothy Callahan researches health politics at Texas A&M.
And all they talk about, COVID.
If you look at the actions of Republican political leaders over the past year, at various times they've sort of downplayed the severity of the virus and downplayed the need to follow public health measures, for example, wearing masks.
Did you ever see a man that likes a mask as much as him?
Republicans in the public might not think it's as necessary to get vaccinated if the virus isn't that severe.
And conservative media groups at times offering mixed messaging about unproven treatments for COVID and pushing back on the vaccination campaign.
On the question of the corona vaccine, our leaders are definitely not pro-choice. Their view is do what you're told and don't complain. No uncomfortable questions. Those aren't just suggestions, they're rules, and Silicon Valley plans to enforce them.
Former President Donald Trump did get the vaccine in secret and recently told Fox's Maria Bartiromo that others should get vaccinated as well.
I would recommend it to a lot of people that don't want to get it, and a lot of those people voted for me, frankly.
This message from a man conservatives voted for twice, seemingly with little impact.
The fact that he got it or he pushed it or, I'm appalled, he's like, my warp speed. I mean, I don't think that that's a wise choice. I don't know why he made that choice. I don't know, behind the scenes politically what he was facing.
Experts say there is a way to change minds on this issue.
Recommendations from a physician are among the most effective recommendations that exist to convince individuals to vaccinate in general. In addition to that, it could be local community leaders, local religious leaders. All of them might be slightly more effective at convincing individuals to vaccinate.
Public health officials certainly hope that's the case, at the risk of large Republican voting blocs around the country remaining vulnerable to the virus and whatever new COVID strains come next.
The White House urging governors to reinstate mask mandates with coronavirus cases rising across the country. Here's Andy Slavitt on MSNBC this morning.
We're not out of this pandemic yet. We still have an accelerating threat. There's millions and millions of people that haven't yet been vaccinated. And so lifting all these restrictions, telling people not to wear masks, gathering in large crowds, that's the equivalent of playing with fire.
Joining me now, Dr. Aditi Nerikar, physician at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Nerikar, today Arkansas's governor ended his state's mask mandate. Alabama is ending its mandate next week. What are your concerns about those kinds of rollbacks at this stage of the game?
Hi, Allison. Nice to be here. So there's four main considerations when we're thinking about pandemic response. The first is, of course, the variants, right? 60% of the COVID cases right now are due to the variant B117 from the UK, and that's not a good thing. The second is vaccinations. We're doing a great job with vaccinations and rolling out vaccinations to more people, increasing eligibility, but only 15% of our population is vaccinated at this time. And then the third is human behavior, wearing masks and these things that are so important. We know social distancing, hand washing, masks are critical. And finally, the mandates. These mandates are much disaligned with the CDC. Currently, the CDC has suggested, the director was on a press conference and said that there is a sense of impending doom. In January, throughout for the past several weeks, we've had a stable number of cases, and recently we've had a spike in cases. This is very concerning. The White House is very much aligned with the CDC right now, and the messaging is really clear. We are not out of the woods. We need to be very vigilant. Removing mask mandates is dangerous right now, and we don't want history to repeat itself. So even though we're doing everything we can with the vaccine efforts in the US, we really do have to be very careful. And the mandates are removing masks. It's just not the way to go.
One positive trend, as vaccine supply is ramping up, Americans do seem less hesitant to get the shot. 17% of adults say they definitely or probably won't get it. That is down from 22% in January, according to a U.S. Census survey. What would you say, though, to people in that 17% who are still reluctant to get a shot?
Yeah, vaccine hesitancy has been something that we've been working on and tackling for a long time over the past several months. There was a recent study done by the Kaiser Family Foundation, which showed that people are more willing to get the vaccine, but there is still a group. 3 out of 10 people in this poll found that they didn't know where to go for the vaccine, didn't know if they were eligible. So vaccine hesitancy is still an issue. Vaccines are critical to reversing this pandemic and getting it under control, getting us all immunized. We also have to really work on vaccine education and, most importantly, vaccine access. We need to make sure that we have enough vaccines for enough people and, most importantly, get the people to the vaccine so they can get vaccinated. That is critical and a critical next step for us.
A single dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine is 80% effective in preventing coronavirus infections, according to the CDC. But Dr. Fauci says do not skip the second shot. Here he is on CNBC.
We don't know how long that 80% is durable. It may drop off a cliff in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The other thing is that even though it's 80% protective, the level of antibody that it induces is far lower than after the second dose.
Why else is it so important to get that second shot, to not just get the first shot, assume it's good enough, and walk away?
It is so critical. So we know with the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, right? We need 2 shots, with Johnson & Johnson 1 shot. It is so critical to finish that vaccination regimen. So 1 shot gives us an 80% decrease in prevention of COVID, but 2 shots gives us a 90% decrease in the transmission, which is a wonderful study, which was just recently done. And it's a real world example with healthcare workers. The reason 2 shots are better than 1 is because with 2 shots, we have the best possible chance of long-lasting immunity. With 1 shot, yes, it is 80% effective at preventing transmission, but we don't know how long that a protection lasts. There is an almost 10-fold increase in our protection when we get the 2 shots, and 2 shots is much, much better than 1, and that is why we recommend it.
Dr. Narakar, thank you so much for the advice. I know this is your first time with us on the evening show here on News Now. I hope you'll come back again.
Thank you so much, Allison.
LA County scrapping a plan to build a new prison, investing in affordable housing, medical services, and job training instead. NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce has more from LA.
This right here, this is my house on wheels, you would say. I have my tent, I have my exercise equipment. This is where I'm basically living right now. How can we afford $2,000 a month if that's what you make? Then you got to worry about food, clothes, hygiene, the basic necessities. You got to be realistic, and then you wonder why people turn back to crime.
Larry Stewart is one of over 66,000 adults who don't have stable housing in Los Angeles County. It's a common challenge for the thousands upon thousands released from prisons and jails every year, too.
I've been filling out applications. I'm on like 3 Section 8 waiting lists. The lists, they all tell me, are 5 years and more. So how can a man they call reentry coming back into society, rehabilitated, it's just that much harder to go back to your neighborhood.
After getting involved with gangs and crime at a young age, he served his time for homicide and robbery, over 20 years. But transitioning back into society doesn't happen overnight. LA County says it has a solution to this unrelenting cycle, a restorative justice village, a campus that will include 232 units of affordable housing, medical services, and access to job training. The housing alone is estimated to cost $48 million, 42 of which comes from the 2020 coronavirus relief bill, plus another $6 million from the county. And a $70 million medical center will be down the street. The idea had been thrown around for years in LA, but last year the concept gained popularity among some voters after the George Floyd protests and these calls.
When I say defund, you say police, defund! Police! Defund! Police!
Other cities like Austin, San Francisco, New York have similar proposals with the goal of ushering in racial equality through social services. And this facility is only the beginning. 57% of LA voters approved Measure J. It dedicates 10% of the county's locally generated revenue solely to social services, and the money can't be touched by the sheriff, who, along with some unions representing county employees, opposed the bill because of possible cuts to law enforcement. Now, details are still being worked out, but advocates of the bill are hoping this facility is the first of many like it.
For us at Homeboy, we have a long track record of being successful helping people get out of the gang lifestyle and life of crime. And really, we do that with not a lot of government funds. And I know if we had more government funds, we could really double our impact.
Tom Vazzo is the CEO of Homeboy Industries. It's a job training nonprofit for former convicts. And their center is just around the corner from the new campus.
Measure J of really putting money with community-based organizations, that's a different mindset.
So for now, Larry is just holding on as best he can until applications open. We asked the county when that will be and what criteria potential residents will have to meet, but we have not gotten an answer.
Let's say they do have a unit for you, Larry.
Yeah.
Can you allow yourself to think about how good it would feel to just have a steady, reliable place to lay your head at night?
Truthfully, I always had a dream of just hooking up my own bathroom. I haven't took but one bath since I've been out of prison. To take a bubble bath straight up and just sit there and just sit and know that when I walk outside, I don't got to do this before I get in my car. So that right there, just the basics. I just want the basics now that I done came through the mud.
It is, quite frankly, the best week of the year, in my opinion. Baseball is back. Opening day is in less than 48 hours. And for one player in particular, opening day is extra special this year. Orioles first baseman Trey Mancini back in the game after beating stage 3 colon cancer. He needed surgery and 6 months of chemotherapy, all during the height of the pandemic. I spoke with Trey today about his recovery, the road back to baseball, and how he's raising awareness about colon cancer. Trey, you are the first MLB player we have ever had on NBC News Now. So thank you so very much for being here. We are so happy for you. You've been in remission for more than 5 months now. You're hitting over 300 in spring training. It sounds like things are going pretty well. How are you feeling?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I'm feeling really good. You never know exactly how you're going to feel after you go through something like I did until you start playing in games and, get used to playing baseball every day. And I can happily say that I feel great and I'm ready to go and really excited for this season.
So take us back to last year. I think we all have this tendency, right, to think of cancer as something that happens to older people, not 20-somethings, especially not 20-something professional athletes who were in peak shape. How did you know that something was wrong?
So if you go on Google and Google colon cancer symptoms, I didn't really have basically anything that you would see on there, minus just a little bit of fatigue. I felt a little fatigued at times. I thought part of that was just getting older. I thought maybe I needed to get more sleep, but we found out about it through a blood test. So we are lucky enough in Major League Baseball to get blood tested, and we get physicals every year. And my iron levels came back really low, so we knew something was wrong. Our team trainers ordered a colonoscopy for me, and we found a tumor through that. So I'm very fortunate to have caught it when I did, because otherwise I think it would have progressed a lot further. So I feel very fortunate in that way.
Absolutely. I mean, having gone through this, any advice that you would give to our viewers when it comes to cancer awareness screenings, things we should be doing even in our 20s and 30s? Because I laughed when you said you were worried about maybe you were just getting older. For those of us who don't play pro sports, 28, 29 is still really young.
Yeah. I guess in baseball terms, whenever you say you're 29 years old, which is what I am now, you feel a little older. So, just listen to your body. That's my main advice. If you think something feels off, let somebody know about it. And I think that's really important to do. And I mean, never be afraid to tell a doctor or a loved one how you're feeling, because it can save your life.
Happy birthday, by the way. I know you did just celebrate your 29th. So let's talk about the Orioles. Last year, they made T-shirts that said fight with your number 16 as the I and the G. They raised $80,000 for the Colorectal Cancer Alliance selling those shirts. Tell us more about that support, that love from the Orioles organization, and how you're using it to launch your own foundation.
It's been absolutely incredible. The outreach I received from my teammates, from the fans in Baltimore last year, from my family, from my girlfriend, Sarah, who was with me the entire step of the way. She was basically my nurse the entire time. I'm so lucky to have her and all my loved ones in my life, my parents, my sisters, everybody's been so amazing. And the fans in Baltimore also were just incredible. They made the most difficult time in my life a lot easier by showing me so much support, and it really inspired me throughout the process to get back to playing, and I'm so excited to be back. And yes, like you said, I have a foundation now. We've done a lot with the Colorectal Cancer Alliance this month. I partnered with Squatty Potty to help raise funds for people in underserved communities, and we're going to be doing some other cool stuff, not all colon cancer related too. We're going to do some stuff with like a backpack program around Baltimore. So we've got pretty big plans for the foundation.
That's awesome to hear. All right, so we got to talk about coming back to baseball. What was it like to step up to the plate for the Grapefruit League opener? Like, if you could describe for our viewers what that moment was like, did you just take a moment and capture it all, take it all in? It must have felt incredible.
It did. It was definitely the most emotional spring training at bat I've ever had. I can definitely say that, because they're technically glorified practice games. And going into that day, I didn't really think about it too much. I didn't treat it like any other day. And then when I stepped up to the plate and everybody gave me an ovation, I wasn't totally expecting that, but it brings up a lot of emotions, because there were a lot of times last year where I didn't think I was going to play again. And, to be back on the field and, again, to just have a bunch of people supporting me there meant a whole lot, and I was just so thankful to be back on a baseball field.
I mean, you mentioned this, right? We all get excited around spring training, but it literally is practice time, getting ready for the season. But when you're coming back from cancer, it's not that at all, right? It's really testing where you are, if you're healthy again, how you're doing. What has spring training been like for you, and what have you sort of learned about your body and where you're at over the last weeks?
Yeah, you're exactly right. This spring training has been much different for me. Having a year and a half off from playing in games, I didn't know exactly where I was going to be at baseball-wise, so I had to take every game very seriously, get used to being back on my legs every day like I was. I'm back at first base, so you got to be in a really low ready position there. Just little things like that. You got to get yourself back in shape for it. And I can luckily say that I feel great, and I know I can play every day this season. And I'm very happy to say that.
Was there one thing that you were shocked by, maybe that you said, all right, I came back and this was really easy. I'm surprised how easy this was. And on the flip side, something that you were like, man, I got really out of shape on this level, or I really had to fight back here, and this has been the toughest thing for me?
Yeah, so that first at bat back, I ended up getting a hit that at bat, and it felt just like old times, and I didn't miss a beat. And then a few at bats after that, I definitely had some rust that got exposed, and I had to kind of get used to being back in the box, things like that. So I got a little too confident too early there, but I'm luckily feeling great now. And then I had to adjust a lot to being back in the field. The speed of the game at the major league level is extremely fast, and I forgot how fast it is. I had a lot of time off, so I really had to get used to being back playing defense again, and I feel much better than I did a month ago out there.
Yeah, for anyone who complains that baseball is a slow game, don't say that to someone who plays Major League Baseball. They will definitely disagree. All right, so we got to talk. Opening day, less than 48 hours away now. If all goes well, you will have hit a home run by this time on Thursday. And I got to tell you, Trey, as a lifelong Yankees fan, no one is rooting harder for you to beat the Red Sox on Thursday than me. But what are you most looking forward to this season? And how has your cancer battle changed how you think about your career, about life on and off the field? How is your perspective different going into Thursday?
Yeah, whenever you're going through a cancer battle, and what I went through last year, baseball was on the back of my mind. It really was. And you put things in perspective, because my whole life, all of the biggest problems I had ever experienced were baseball related. And, I had never really gone through a real life crisis until last year. And you get your priorities straight. Not that I really needed to, but you do put a lot of things in perspective, and you do realize baseball is a game. It's my job. I still take it very seriously. I'm still going to be a very intense player, but I think I'll be able to shake off bad games much easier now and kind of leave everything at the field.
Well, Trey, thank you so much for coming on with us. We're so happy to hear that you're healthful. You kicked cancer. Congratulations. And come on, hit a home run against the Red Sox. We'll all be rooting for that.
I really appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.